Welcome back to day two of Amazon Q4 Mastery 2022. I'm Ankita Patil, Product Evangelist at SellerApp, and I'll be your host for the event. Q4 is a crucial time not only for Amazon sellers, but also for D2C brands and e-commerce sellers. Consumer behavior is changing and purchase spend increases during this time of the year. Besides, the pandemic created monumental changes in the e-com and retail industries. You need to offer incremental value to your customers to sustain the rising customer demand, be it expediting shipping, product packaging, optimizing sales funnel, selling tips for Q4, and more. We help you unveil details for this seller summit. Amazon Q4 Mastery is a virtual summit with a single goal to help Amazon sellers master the fourth quarter. During this event, we bring together a diverse group of Amazon experts and e-com thought leaders from around the world to assist you in understanding the Q4 puzzle. This Amazon seller event will teach you everything you need to know to succeed during the holiday season. Well, in addition to this, there's a good news. We also have exciting goodie bags for all the registered sellers. The goodie bag has some interesting items that will further set you apart from your competition in Q4. So stay tuned. On day one of Q4 Mastery 2022, our expert panelists explored key strategies regarding online commerce trends, optimizing your listings for the holiday season, how to create ads that convert, and how to leverage the data for Q4 success. I also have an exciting announcement to make at the end of the session. Q4 Mastery giveaway prize winners. Well, this session just got interesting, right? Moving on, in the day two session of Amazon Q4 Mastery 2022, the topics we are exploring are funding and budgeting, inventory management, repricing strategies for successful Q4. You'll also get a chance to interact with the e-com industry leaders, so let me bring them on the screen. Yes, so let me tell you more about our experts. Firstly, we have Ben Kotch. He is the co-founder and president of AccrueMe. He oversees AccrueMe's portfolio of Amazon FBA companies, actively selling 20K plus unique ASINs. He co-founded Algo Online Retail and Algo Plus, a community of roughly 10K Amazon sellers across North America. Amazing, right? Hi, Ben. How are you doing?
Hello, I'm good. Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
It's wonderful to have you here. Thank you so much. Next speaker is Jack Howard. He is the head of strategic partnerships from Payability. Jack has over 6 years of business development and partnerships experience at hypergrowth startups. Jack was also instrumental in advising private equity and VC-backed companies on their real estate footprints in NYC. Hi, Jack. How are you?
Hey, Ankita, that was quite the introduction, and clearly don't have video, but anyway, it's a pleasure to be with your community.
Yeah, so I think Jack is attending a wedding, and there is some issue there, but he'll definitely be with us. He's going to give us few expert tips on various topics. So let's move on. We have Manish Chowdhary. He is the founder and CEO of Cahoot, the world's first peer-to-peer fulfillment network. He's an e-commerce veteran who has started multiple startup successful businesses and holds 10 patents for his innovations. Hi, how are you? I think you are on mute, Manish.
Hi, Ankita. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Wonderful, Manish. How excited are you for today's event?
I am super pumped. This is such a gathering of great speakers and the audience. So I know the audience is going to get a lot of value. So make sure you all stick around till the end.
Wonderful. That's good to know. Our next speaker is Blair Forrest. He is the Chief Marketing Officer of AMZ Prep, one of Canada's fastest growing startups in the fulfillment space that helps businesses and brands with their warehousing and logistics needs. Hi, Blair. How are you? Welcome to the session.
Hey guys, you can hear me okay? It's loud and
Yes,
clear.
perfect. Perfect.
I'm super excited to be here. Thank you guys for having me. I'm excited to talk about the sexy space of logistics and inventory and fulfillment. So if this isn't the most exciting events, I would argue it's going to be the best. So buckle up, guys. If there's a thing or two you don't know about inventory, today's the damn day you're going to learn. So I'm super excited. Thank you guys for having me.
Awesome, awesome. Our next speaker is Ian Kaneshiro. He's the head of sales and customer success at SellerApp. Ian has leveraged his account management and business development skills in the world of advertising technology. He uses his experience to build a bridge between people and technology and is supporting Amazon sellers in scaling their businesses. Hi, Ian. How are you?
I'm doing swell. I'm super happy to be here. I'm feeling really lucky to be on a panel with such amazing speakers, and looking forward to talk a little bit about repricing in Q4.
Wonderful, wonderful. It's so good to have you all here. I'm really excited for today's event. I'm as excited as our wonderful audience is. So, without any further ado, let's get started. E-commerce continues to prove to be a lucrative and vital part of the future economy, but sectors are already being impacted by the juggernaut differently. By understanding the trends of today and seeing where they are headed, you can better prepare yourself and your business for future success in e-commerce. Now, speaking of strategies and what to do, my first question is to all of you. What are some of the key mistakes that you have seen sellers make during this Prime Day, and what should be avoided during Q4? Let's start with you, Ben.
Yeah, so that's a good question. And I think kind of the two mistakes that we've seen people really just repeating throughout most of this year have come down to inventory management and profit management. So first, for inventory management, a lot of sellers, especially earlier in the year, were running out of stock because of all the shipping challenges. So they ended up placing larger orders for like 6 to 12 months worth of inventory to try and avoid stockouts. And now they're running into problems with Amazon restock limits and storage fees and issues with 3PLs, where they're ending up spending more and having more problems than they did when they were running out of inventory. So there's always that problem, and there's also sellers who are putting a lot of capital into a bunch of ASINs that maybe aren't selling as well, instead of focusing on their primary ASINs, which is causing them to stock out of their profitable good ASINs because they're trying to launch so many new products. So I think that's a big thing that we've seen all year, is just inventory management with all the changes, particularly with importing products and shipping from China. And then for profit management, a lot of Amazon sellers have been looking at their Amazon fees and volatility in import and inbound shipping prices. And all of those things have been going up with inflation in general, and they haven't really been increasing their prices to account for that. So a lot of them are seeing their actual expenses, their shipping, their manufacturing, and their Amazon fees go up anywhere from like 10 to 25% plus, but they're not increasing their prices to account for that. So maybe all of their expenses on their product increased by 25 or 20%, and they haven't increased their actual sales price by 20%. So they're not making as much money, or they end up losing money to try and stay competitive with their price. But they really need to focus on kind of making up for those increase in fees and just inflationary expenses. So that's kind of the two main things that we've seen people struggling with this year in general.
Ben, I totally agree with you. So, all these factors of inventory management, purchase trends, and pricing strategies should have been better during the Prime Day. But no worries, this is going to be a good lesson for all our Amazon sellers to come up with new strategies to win big this Q4. So, what are your thoughts on this, Manish? Would you like to say something?
Absolutely. So several things. Shippers should try to avoid the port of LA. LA is one of the primary ports where most of the inventory comes in from China, and that port has, because of the dock worker labor shortage and strikes and all of those, there's heavy congestion. We have clients whose container has been sitting there for weeks and waiting to be taken elsewhere. So that's also adding to the cost and also adding to the anxiety, because the deadline for getting your FBA inventory for it to be fully received for the holiday season is November 2nd, which is really not too far. We're talking 10 more days or really 2 weeks. So, a lot of sellers would be wise to avoid the Port of LA. Of course, it's probably too late to do that now. However, there are some other ports like Savannah, Georgia, Charleston, Miami, and on the West Coast, Oakland and Seattle that they should consider. Second, from an inventory management standpoint, just having another fulfillment option in place, FBM. So should not put all your eggs in one basket. Make sure that you have a reliable FBM option so that even if you can't get your inventory in, you continue selling, because holiday season only comes once a year, of course. So those are some, and I know we'll chat more about these topics later in the presentation.
Wonderful, Manish. That was really a great insight from you. What do you think about this, Ian?
Yeah, when we're talking about Prime Day, the jury's still kind of out. Was Prime Day, this most recent Prime Day, a bust? They're saying that there was almost like a 25% decline in the average cart size. And so can we attribute that to inflation, people not having discretionary spending? These are all factors that we have to consider. Because we do know that pricing is still a major factor for consumers, which determine when and where they shop. And Amazon has done an amazing job at, enticing customers to their marketplace with the promise of great deals like in Prime Day. And just a couple of days ago, I read this blog, and it was on a study by Rakuten, the Japanese e-commerce giant that some people call the Amazon of Japan. And they were saying that the three main factors for consumers are reliability, choice, and price. And so when it comes to being a third-party seller on Amazon, Amazon has handled two of those three topics. They've handled the reliability, because they have that Amazon guarantee, and the choice, because there's so many different options. And so when it comes down to it, for the third-party seller, that leaves price. And so and even as a consumer, when I was looking at at Prime Day, whatever it was last week or the week before, I'm not sure if consumers really felt the love. I know personally, when I was looking at some items, the discounts felt minimal, sometimes even seeing the percentage change that was, between 2 and 8%. And so what sellers can do, during future Prime Days and even into Q4 is focusing on pricing, which will allow them to give huge advantages, and maybe even, having a little bit of forethought, a little bit of strategy in trying to manipulate the price upward in order, in the lead up to Prime Day into Q4. So when they are providing bigger discounts where they know there's going to be more volume, customers are spending more, there's more opportunity to kind of capture those sales, but with the two main kind of sellers out there, the resellers and the private label and brands, you do have other factors in play. For the resellers, you have to make sure that you're getting the buy box. And for brands and private label, you have to make sure that you're maintaining the velocity that you want to keep your BSR up. So there are some nuances to this, but I think that there is room to kind of play the game and try to get the most out of the peak times of sales, the times where Amazon and the economy and with Black Friday and everything kind of entice sellers to to spend, or customers to spend more on those specific days and time periods.
Absolutely wonderful. So I love the thought of reliability, choice, and pricing, and how they are connected with our Q4 marketing strategy. So thank you so much, Ian, for your inputs. What are your views on this, Blair?
I had three amazing gentlemen that covered, I think, majority of the key points you guys want to consider. I think the key takeaway, especially like now everyone's The easiest way to say it, got punched in the face, right? Like Amazon's change, inventory limits, like logistics, like anyone that's in the inventory, if you're selling product in Amazon, you've been hit with some way. So the real key takeaway that we've seen for a lot of brands is this whole minutia around diversification. So there's two ways that I wanted to just tackle it, because I feel from a profitability, we have some really talented folks that are speaking here today that can talk about the margins and pricing strategy. But from a diversification, one is that majority of the brands, I think last year, they weren't thinking about secondary options, the what ifs with Amazon FBA. So like one of those key ones, of course, is let's go merchant fulfillment. Is that the fun topic? Is that the best opportunity? Traditionally not. But the issue was that just like how last year when there was inventory hits or there was something with an issue at the warehouse, it wasn't that the FBM's the best scenario. They just didn't, frankly, have it set up. It was either like their fulfillment partner didn't offer it. If they did, maybe they didn't do it in time. So it was just this whole idea of they just didn't have enough runway to actually set up something in place. So goodness forbid, if you did get hit with inventory limits last second, at least you had a backup plan. And we saw like millions and millions of dollars lost in Q4, specifically because these brands just didn't want to dive that deep into the inventory side. Didn't have anyone focusing on it because they were focusing on, like Ian mentioned, the Prime Day strategy, their pricing, their advertising. But we like to think about inventory as like, it's like eating your broccoli at the end of the day, right? Like the whole logistics side of the business. The second side of diversification, and it's too late now, but you can plan for next year too, is that we saw a huge push this year. So we're here in Toronto, Canada. So like one of our warehouses is right behind us. And there's been a huge wave this year going to Amazon.ca, not using NARF fulfillment, like where you'd use your US fulfillment to ship to Canada. No. A lot of brands actually using brand new stock, sending it to a Canadian FBA hub and launching Amazon.ca as a whole new marketplace. And that has opened up a whole new chain of opportunities, new demand. But most importantly, back to kind of what I was mentioning, and you'll see probably the trend for a lot of my conversation is this idea of like diversification. So run it both ways. But the one key takeaway is like, is FBM an option? It's not the fun route, but you got to eat your broccoli, make sure that at least you have it set up or you have a partner that can. And then two, do you look at international markets? Is now the right time? And is there lower hanging fruits than having to expand overseas with Europe and UK? That there's your next door neighbors up here in Canada. So I'm a bit biased, but of course there's definitely new opportunities here. So we're seeing those two in parallel, and it's a blast. So it's fun, but yeah, brands are preparing. They're just, I think, taking a little bit different of approach this year.
Well, yeah, I totally agree with you. Effective inventory management is critical. You need a solid understanding of your supply chain processes, inventory counts, and inventory analytics across all channels to be a successful e-com seller. So moving on to our next topic, that is funding and budgeting. So let's move on. As we know that the popularity of Amazon leads to the marketplace getting more saturated every year, sellers will definitely need to invest in things like, better product features, better advertising, better product images, and so on. And as a lot of e-com business owners don't have access to traditional financing options, they start to look at alternate financing options. Now, let's say there's a seller A who has a lot of product inventory but doesn't have enough budget to spend on advertising and needs funding as soon as possible. How long will it take for this seller to get funding, and for what else should he or she be aware of? Now, let's go to Ben. What do you think about this?
Yeah, so I think that's a very interesting question. So when you say, a seller has a lot of inventory and they don't have the budget to basically market it or sell it, it kind of makes me think that they're in one of three buckets. Either they're launching a new product maybe, or they purchased more inventory than they needed. They purchased too much inventory, or they don't have a profitable launch or PPC strategy to begin with. So if they're in one of those first two buckets, either they're launching a new product or they purchased too much inventory, they really kind of have two options, in my opinion. One is to rely on their profitable ASINs to fund the launch of those new products. So they can either get funding against those profitable ASINs or self-fund from the sale of those profitable ASINs. Or number two, if they're basically launching their first product and they don't have any other Amazon business, they're basically going to have to rely on personal financing options, so savings or credit cards or something like that, to basically fund the startup of their business. There aren't a lot of investors, fintech investors, banks, anyone really lending or investing in a startup. So if they don't have a base of already successful business, they're really going to have to rely on their personal resources. And then if they're in bucket number three, where they have a profitable PPC strategy and they can basically spend $1 and after their fees and cost of goods get back $1.50, they should be able to either self-fund that, right? By every sale they make, they get more back than they put in, and just keep reinvesting that money. Or they should be able to pretty easily find an investor like AccrueMe to fund them because they have a track record of profitably running campaigns and selling inventory. So those are kind of their two options. And if they don't have a profitable PPC strategy and they're just launching a product, you want to be really careful with borrowing money to cover those things, because, if you're testing a new PPC strategy or a new product launch strategy with somebody else's money, you better be pretty confident that it's going to work, or else you still have to pay that money back. And especially if you're new and you don't have a business to finance against, you're basically financing based on your personal credit or personal relationships. So you really want to make sure that you have a plan to pay that money back. So hopefully that is helpful.
That's good to know. It's definitely significant to consider how you want to spend your money during Q4. Are you spending money on marketing, or are you spending it on product development? If you are unsure about, what you want to spend money on, it's always good to create a budget for Q4, and then you can definitely work around it. So perfect. Now, my next question to you, Ben, is, when it comes to financing, Amazon has a few options for sellers, namely Amazon Lending, Amazon Line of Credit, and Merchant Cash Advance. What's the key differences between them, and are they really worth it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's a good question. We'll keep the Ben show going. So Amazon Lending Amazon basically has two primary products in the US. It's Amazon Lending and then their line of credit with Marcus by Goldman Sachs line of credit. So let's first talk about Amazon Lending. Those are typically going to be term loans, which means they'll give you the money. You make equal payments every single month to pay it back, and you pay an interest rate. So Amazon Lending and Amazon Loan could be a good option for a mature Amazon business that's kind of not growing as quickly anymore and needs some financing. The thing that you really want to be careful with or consider with Amazon Lending is going to be the length of the loan. So Amazon lending loans can range from 3 months to 24 months. And for example, if you borrow $100,000 from Amazon and they give you 3 months to pay it back, you're basically making a $33,000 payment every month. Whereas if they give you that same $100,000 and give you 24 months to pay it back, you're only paying about $5,000 a month. So the important thing to consider with Amazon Lending is really the length or the time frame that you have to repay the loan. The shorter it is, the more of an impact it's going to have on your cash flow, and it could potentially have a very negative impact on your cash flow. So that's going to be really important with Amazon Lending. But if you get a long term and you're making $5,000 a month in monthly payments for a $100,000 loan, it could be a pretty good deal for you, especially if you're not trying to reinvest your capital and grow as quickly. The Amazon line of credit from Marcus or Goldman Sachs, it's essentially a credit card that's also secured by your business. So in terms of the actual terms and cost of the loan, or the credit line, it's really not that bad. It's basically just a credit card. I think the thing to be careful with the credit line from Amazon is that it's a credit card that's secured by you personally and your business, whereas if you just go to any bank, you can get a credit card that's either secured by you or your business. So in this case, you're basically guaranteeing the credit line with your business and yourself personally, whereas you can go to a bank and either get a personal credit card or a business credit card and not have to basically double guarantee it. So I think that's the thing with the Amazon credit line to be careful with. And then really with both Amazon funding options, I think a big thing that you want to consider is, do you want to rely more on Amazon for your infrastructure and for your business needs? So I think, like like Blair was saying, diversification. We've had worked with people before where, they have their seller account suspended and they have a loan from Amazon, and Amazon's still telling them they need to make payments, and you're trying to explain to seller support or Amazon lending, I can't make payments because my account's suspended. And it's kind of like, trying to explain to a 5-year-old that they can't eat candy for breakfast. It's like they don't really understand how the two things are related, and it's just another kind of way where you're relying on Amazon and then relying on Amazon's seller support to basically be able to help you if you need help, and you're kind of putting all your eggs in one basket. The last thing that I think you mentioned were merchant advances, factoring, revenue-based loans, all of that kind of stuff. And Amazon doesn't actually offer any of those products directly. They're offered by third-party financing sources. And the thing to really keep in mind with all of those is the terms are all going to be very different, and they all have different purposes or different pros and cons. So when you're looking at any type of financing for your e-commerce business, you want to understand it's not like just going to get a mortgage where you're going to be comparing, a 15-year or a 30-year term, and your interest rate's going to be somewhere between, 4 and 6%. And that's really all you're looking at. There's a lot of nuance to all the different financing options out there for Amazon sellers and e-commerce businesses. And before you sign on one and you take the money, you want to make sure you understand all the nuances and how that's going to impact your business. So really, though, at the end of the day, the number one rule is make sure that you don't borrow money if you're doing it to cover losses. You want to borrow money to grow profitably. So a lot of Amazon sellers out there, they're looking at all these financing options saying, well, my Amazon business lost $10,000 this month, so I need to borrow $100,000 so I can cover my $10,000 losses for the next 10 months. And if you do that, you're basically just digging yourself into a hole. It's better to say I made $10,000 this month. If I had another 100,000, I can make 20,000 next month. So I'm going to borrow money. So you want to borrow money to grow profitably. You don't want to be borrowing money to basically cover losses. Hopefully that is helpful.
Don't borrow money to cover losses and only borrow money to grow profitably. Wonderful, Ben. That totally makes sense. So moving on to our next topic. So that is inventory management. And let's talk about another crucial part of Q4 preparation, that ensuring that you have enough inventory. Inventory management is, again, one of the critical factors behind a seller's Q4 success. And remember, this is the busiest time of the year. So Manish, what are the ways in which sellers can mitigate all the risks related to Amazon supply chain this Q4?
Ankita, that's a very important question on the minds of all the sellers. We know that there are long delays in receiving inventory in FBA. Last year, the deadline for Black Friday, Cyber Monday to get your inventory in FBA was November 6th. This year is November 2nd. And we routinely speak with clients that are experiencing long delays in getting the inventory. And the delays are even more severe if they send them through LTL, through freight, truckload, less than truckload, then it takes longer for that inventory to be received. So if you're not already ahead of the curve, we would recommend that you might consider sending inventory through small parcel, which is UPS, FedEx, rather than sending pallets and freight. So I know that is more expensive than sending in bulk. However, not having your inventory received on time can jeopardize your Q4 sales. So something for you to consider. The second thing is it's taken for granted that, make sure your inventory is compliant. If your inventory is not compliant, especially in Q4, FBA, they're going to put it aside. And, it's going to be very challenging to get that inventory received. And I know Blair can talk a lot about this because they do a lot of FBA prep and what it takes to make sure everything is compliant with your barcodes and FNSKU and, all the packaging and so on. And once again, we talked earlier about, having a FBM partner. A lot of sellers that we've seen use FBA to also fulfill orders from other channels, because it's simpler, because all your inventory is with Amazon. The sellers should know that even the inventory that you store to fulfill, let's say, Shopify or Walmart or eBay orders, they do count towards your restock limits. And inventory restock limits is a real thing. And I've spoken with sellers large and small. I've spoken with sellers that do 9 figures on Amazon. I mean, you can't get bigger than that. And I also speak with sellers that do 6 figures on Amazon. And believe it or not, all of them experience some sort of restock limit. And in simple words, I will break it down for you. What is your inventory restock limit? Is essentially what the Amazon has given you in terms of your quota minus the space that's currently occupied in Amazon, and minus any of the inbounds that you've sent. All of that combined dictates your stock limit. And by just there's several factors. There's something called Inventory Performance Index, which most of you may be familiar with. But let's say I want to walk a scenario with you here that you've got a bestseller that goes out of stock. As a consequence of that, your seller rank, the sales rank of that SKU is going to go down. When the sales rank goes down, the sell-through rate of that SKU goes down, and it basically drops your entire IPI, Inventory Performance Index, for your account, and that leads to a downward spiral, which means your storage limits decline as well. So it's very important for sellers to very and actively manage their restock limits and Inventory Performance Index. And I can go on and give some additional thoughts, Ankita, on how to do this and so on, if you'd like, because I have a lot of additional comments that sellers can use in terms of practical advice on how to manage it.
Thank you so much, Manish, for your inputs. Also, keeping track of your inventory using inventory control tools ensures that you are working with real-time information. It optimizes the forecasting and provides accurate inventory data to manage stock and, again, mitigate inventory risk. So thank you again. Moving on, another key metrics that helps sellers measure the health of their inventory is Inventory Performance Index, as you mentioned in the previous answer, based on how well you can generate sales by stocking trending products and optimizing on-hand inventory at the same time. So, Manish, what are the immediate things sellers can implement if their IPI score is below the threshold?
Well, let's first break this down, Ankita. What is IPI score? It's a weekly historical performance of your inventory, meaning how fast. FBA was never designed to be a long-term storage, as we know. It's a number between 0 to 1,000, and you can look at this in your Seller Central dashboard. There are 4 important factors that influence your IPI score: excess inventory, sell-through rate, stranded inventory, and how much inventory you have in stock. In order to achieve a good sell-through rate, I mean, these are stuff that you can find on your Seller Central dashboard. Amazon considers a sell-through rate of 3 to 7 to be good, which essentially amounts to about 30 days, average of 30 days of inventory. And if you want to be excellent, then that sell-through rate has to be greater than 7, which is what Amazon considers to be an excellent score, which is less than 2 weeks of inventory in FBA. So you can imagine that these are pretty aggressive numbers for sellers to meet. However, sellers can do some really cool things, and actionable advice that I have for sellers is the first thing you can do is address your stranded inventory, meaning fix the listings as per Amazon suggestions. And there's a lot of tools and suggestions available to you right in the Seller Central. Just don't ignore them. It's very important to stay on top of that. Remove the listings that cannot be fixed, because that's unnecessarily dragging your IPI score down. And then this also helps improve your excess inventory metrics. There are other things you can do, how do you reduce excess inventory? If you have stuff that's not moving, that is simply stranded, or rather it's just accumulating and aging, you might consider selling them and using some aggressive promotions and coupons. And then there's also an option to remove the inventory, because if the inventory is not selling, I mean, we know that Q4 storage fees at Amazon is 4 times on storage fees. So there's no point leaving that inventory, and you should do that quick, because once you get in the middle of the holiday season, it's going to be really difficult to get that inventory out of FBA, because FBA is focused on fulfillment, not on removal. If you don't wish to remove and that inventory is not of much value to you, put a disposal order with FBA. Let that inventory go, because if it's not contributing to your positive numbers, let it not ruin the holidays by taking the IPI down and your restock limits for the products that you do want to store. Another thing, I know Ben talked about launching new products, which is of course very important. But if you have an unproven product and you're going to launch and you're going to send a ton of inventory, and if that new product doesn't work, that will cannibalize your space from your hero SKUs or your best sellers. So you want to be careful about that. And once again, I touched on this a little briefly earlier about using, when to use Amazon MCF, multi-channel fulfillment. And by the way, multi-channel fulfillment, we've done some number crunching. It's expensive. It's a lot more expensive than fulfilling orders that originate on Amazon. So if you try to send your Shopify order to Amazon for fulfillment, that inventory counts towards your restock limit and FBA. So those are things that you need to watch out for. And it's as much as 51% more expensive than regular FBA. A few of the other things you can do is, of course, double down on your fast moving, your best sellers by winning the buy box, getting the pricing right, and improve the sell-through rate of your account overall by adding fast-moving SKUs so that they carry the burden of the SKUs that are not moving. The second thing you can do is also improve your listing, A+ content, visibility, improve that conversion, add videos, add photos, all of those things. And of course, ad spend, because we know that Amazon, the days of organic listings alone are numbered, and most sellers rely on clever ad spend to drive traffic so that they can get the sales. So those are some clear tips for sellers to go and immediately fix their account if they haven't done so already, Ankita.
Yes, absolutely, Manish. Amazon FBM has also become more important in the wake of Amazon FBA inventory fees and restrictions. So in this case of IPI score, sellers can definitely think about it. Thank you, Manish, for putting forward these amazing points. Now, moving on to the next concern, that is, it is essential to monitor and adjust your reorder points for your inventory to meet the demand of your products. This helps to ensure that you always have enough goods in stock to fulfill orders while quickly minimizing excess inventory costs. Now, Blair, what are the ways to set reorder points for your inventory at Amazon?
Yeah, it's a great comment, and so there's 2 points, and hopefully everyone can see me now. It's Q4 in the warehouse, so the Wi-Fi is a little bit crazy here. So if there ends up being an issue, just definitely send a quick PM. But so the 1 point, Manish hit it out of the park when it came to FBM. So I wanted to reiterate that really quickly, if you don't mind, just to make sure you guys got as much value there, because Manish smashed it. So just a couple of key takeaways of what he mentioned. That multi-channel fulfillment, huge opportunity, whether it's a Shopify store, whether it's another e-commerce channel. You got to be careful if you think about Walmart and the other marketplaces, because they don't love it. But if you have the limits, multi-channel fulfillment can be a huge tap to get into those channels. A couple of things that we've seen for a lot of the big brands that we do the fulfillment here in Canada for is what Manish already said, which was, one is clear your returns and active inventory. Manish hit that out of the park. So wipe those slate. Look at FBM. And one of the actual things we saw one of the brands do was they were using NARF fulfillment. So all of their stock for Canada and the US was in a US Amazon FBA hub. And we're trying to figure out their Canadian inventory limits. And we're like, guys, like you're just getting hit. Like we're trying to figure out the actual levers because their US was at a complete capacity. So what we end up seeing though was that a lot of those Canadian orders, they were taking up stock in the US warehouse and they weren't getting fulfilled to a US customer. So when we divided them out and used 2 different warehouses, that opened up a whole new plethora of space for new Amazon stock. The last thing that I want to just emphasize that Manish said was that how do you activate better sales turnover? So he mentioned a bunch of really cool ideas of like listing optimization, product photography, advertising. These all come for a place. And the reason that Manish was emphasizing for you guys was that Amazon looks at your product turnover as one of the key metrics when performing on Amazon. And product turnover, in its simplest calculation on a kind of a napkin, is that your total product days in stock versus how quickly that product's turning over. And as you guys can imagine, less days in stock, more product turnover, the better the velocity. So whether it's like pushing more on advertising, whether it's getting more strategic with content, these are all things that you can do to help accelerate that sales turnover, which in parallel increases your IPI, which of course leaves you to the grand lever, which is more inventory inside of Amazon. So I wanted to mention the other one, but I wanted to make sure I emphasize all the great things that Manish said. From touch points in terms of inventory, it's super codependent. Like it's very brand by brand now because of these inventory limits. So there's not one rolling period where we'll emphasize how much stock a customer needs to send to Amazon. The key points as sellers you guys need to look for is that Amazon's really sensitive now. And like Manish mentioned it from an inventory limit. The key is to push that turnover. So right now, our rule of thumb is usually around 30 days worth of stock. We don't want to go over that because it will hurt our turnover. But for some brands, we might need a longer run rate. So the things you want to calculate is how long will it take for your 3PL or warehouse partner or you in your garage prepping the orders? How long will that take? How long will it take to get to Amazon? And how long is it going to take for receiving? So like when you're calculating your inventory demand, it doesn't need to be a super calculated process, but you want to calculate for the unpreparable, right? If Amazon needs to do a transfer between two warehouses, and you didn't prepare for that, you're going to be out of stock, which is like the last thing you want to do. So you need to reverse engineer it, but just think about the unknowns, right? The preparation from the warehouse, the transfers, the shipping it to Amazon. Q4 is really slow for receiving, so make sure that you're on top of it. But we like to go for Q4 15 to 30 days, which is like really nimble. But it's because we're trying to improve the turnover, which helps with the IPI score. So if we had a little bit more blessing, maybe we would be sending close to like 45 plus days. But it's the ways of Amazon, inventory, and all these costs went up. So we're getting a little bit more nimble. So it's case by case, but take those the napkin calculations just so you can start to prepare it on your end. A little bit of a long answer short.
Amazing insights, Blair. Stockouts always make it to the worst nightmare lists of sellers. Not only do they lead to loss of sales, but it also results in reduced customer satisfaction and lower loyalty levels. And that's why setting the right reorder points is critical. So moving on, many sources suggest that drop shipping can be an ideal alternative to stocking up your inventory. Now, how it works, how the customer places an order, the order gets forwarded to your supplier. From there, the drop shipping supplier packs and ships the order to the consumer. However, can you explain a bit about the risks associated with this strategy and things you need to know, Blair?
Yeah, like I think when it comes to that whole side, and I want to hear Manesh's side too, because I think he'll dominate it. It comes back to the basics that we're mentioning, right? Which is like eat your broccoli, really make sure that you're focusing on the inventory strategy and just make sure that you have your calculations in place. So I don't want to overcomplicate it because I feel like I already have. Just get back down to the basics. Manish, what are your thoughts? I don't want to steer it off track, but I wanted to get your opinion on this because you mentioned so many good points on the FBM side.
I mean, I think just like nobody, you would have a backup for your hard drive, right, on your computer. You must also have a backup for FBA at all times. There's just no way around that. I think, and have it tested. You don't want to find out when your hard drive crashes that your backup doesn't work. So a lot of sellers are just waiting till the very last second and they're panicking. And that's really not a good strategy because in the long run, you need to have an alternative, whether it's a dropship supplier, making sure, you every once in a while, like we're all in the IT business, we do what do you call fire drills, like for your fire alarm, so you want to have, well, even your drop shipper, you don't want to not have any contact with them for 10, 11 months of the year. And then all of a sudden you say, hey, I'm going to start sending you orders. I think it's just a great idea to make sure that you have all your different, just like your sourcing, where you're buying from and where you're fulfilling from. All of those things are constantly tested. You stay in close contact, and having an FBM. And if you have Seller Fulfill Prime, by the way, if your Amazon account is configured to Seller Fulfill, you should different of that, because we have several clients where Cahoot helps time orders get access to the Prime shopper, which is very difficult from an FBM perspective. So, Blair, I think you touched on all the high points. Why store FBA inventory in the US? Because I guess that FBA Canada is a little less congested than sending stuff to FBA US. And second, I've also seen a lot of sellers try to, get over-engineer, meaning, as Blair touched on, also has to distribute the inventory. So if you play the game and try to Amazon FBA to send inventory closer, let's say to wherever you are. So we have a seller who is in Baltimore and they only want to send something to Baltimore, but then Amazon has to do inter-warehouse transfer, and that can take weeks. So you really didn't save anything, and that is actually more expensive to begin with. So, try to understand Amazon's perspective and try not to over-engineer and over-game the system, because it doesn't quite work in the long run. But that's, Blair, I'm sure you have more to add, but those are some quick additional tips.
You nailed it.
Thank you.
Yeah, totally you did. Actually, Blair and Manish, you both. I would also like to add on this that Amazon dropshipping is a worthwhile pursuit, provided your supplier is trustworthy, reliable, and knows what needs to be done. Thank you so much for this explanation. Also, a big hello to all the viewers. Thank you for being a part of this event. You can say hi, where you are from, or even leave questions for our experts in our live chat box and comment section below. So since we all are live, we already have a few questions from the audience. So I would like to focus on few. Hey, I have a question. So hi Ken, how are you doing? Once you have established your business, what is the right time to think about scaling, and what's the best funding option for me? What about you, Ben?
Oh, sorry about
Go
that.
for it.
Yeah, well, I think the best time to scale is really when you're turning $1 into more than $1, and to keep repeating that as long as you can. So for me, it's scale until you can't anymore. I think that's the answer for scaling. And then for funding options, it really depends on what you need. So some people just need like short-term, I need money to pay my bills tomorrow. There's different funding options for that, compared to people who say I need, money to make one big inventory purchase, compared to people who say I need ongoing funding to grow my business. So there's really so many, all the funding options for Amazon sellers are so different that there's so many options out there that it's really just going to depend on your personal needs. But, I say just scale though, scale until you're not turning $1 into more than $1. So just that would be my answer.
That's amazing, Ben. Okay, so moving on to the next question, we have over here Gara. Hi Gara, how are you doing? So during the holiday season, maintaining cash flow always become difficult for us. Any advice? Thanks in advance. Go for it, Ben.
All right. Yeah. I mean, I think it depends on where you're struggling with cash flow. So I think a lot of times sellers during the holidays, either they leading up to Q4, they didn't have enough cash to buy more inventory. And a lot of times what sellers will do leading up to Q4 is they're going to focus on a financing option that's going to require them to repay that money pretty quickly. So like a lot of financing options for Amazon sellers out there will require you to pay in as little as 90 days, let's say. So if you use that type of money to fund your inventory for Q4, basically Q4 comes and all of your cash flow is going to be going to repay that money that you borrowed. So I think the first thing is, going into Q4, setting it up right, that, you're getting the right type of financing that's going to allow you to maintain your cash flow and maintain your ad spend and everything you want to do into Q4, and not set it up in a way that basically you borrowed money to get your inventory and now you're paying it all back. I think the other big thing for Q4 is just managing your inventory. Like if you're reordering, trying to order as much as you can and be prepared for Q4 so you don't stock out. But then reordering during Q4 to try and get more inventory to keep replenishing and have a healthy first quarter as well. Like we have a lot of sellers, they're so focused on Q4 that then Q1 rolls around and they basically are out of money and out of inventory. And, it's like kind of a disaster in Q1. So I think a lot of sellers also need to think beyond Q4 and what's going to happen in Q1 after that.
And
Thank
if
you so
I
much,
may add,
Ben. Yes, Ian,
add,
you were saying.
a lot of sellers, I
Yeah.
definitely expect a recession next year, without a doubt. So, and so do all the suppliers understand that, and they may offer you a deal to buy more than you need. It's sort of like buying more for a discount on products that you don't need. So be mindful of that. Don't fall into that trap, and be aggressive selling, because I expect Q1, Q2 to be even softer from a consumer economy standpoint. So don't hold off and wait for the last second. This year happens to be December 25th. Christmas is on Sunday. Shopping is already going to be earlier. More people are going to the store. So if you don't have a store advantage, don't hold on to that inventory. Certainly don't buy more than you need. Don't buy. Port congestions from China is greatly reduced. The container cost from China to Los Angeles is now $2,500. It used to be $21,000 in September of last year. So a lot of this old way of thinking from 2021 is no longer applicable. So sellers need to get refreshed on what's happening today and not overeat, so as to speak. So just be nimble and be very wise with your dollar.
And
Wonderful.
I just like to add on to what kind of Manish and Ben are alluding to, is that what it boils down to is planning. Oftentimes when we find ourselves in a bind, planning, what we do is we can throw money at problems. But if we can start with a solid strategy and plan for things like Q4, when we're talking about cash flow, which is money that we're able to spend right now, we can think about that spend in general, and are there ways to reduce it in a way that doesn't affect my business operation? And so when we get to the point of Prime Days and Q4s, when we might be scrambling to, make changes, be more aggressive, and do all the things that Amazon sellers need to do to, really drive revenue, coming up with a plan and being in place will help us not overspend in those moments, leaving additional cash flow for, inventory and the places that you actually need to put your money during these times of need.
That's amazing, Ian. So moving on to our next question. Hi, Feroz. How are you doing? Thank you for joining today's event. How do you compare this Q4 to last year? Is the demand still there? Ben, would you like to answer this?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at that. So one of the things that we track is inventory turnover. So basically, for all of our sellers, how much inventory do they have in the US, and how does that compare to what their sales are? And we're seeing pretty similar numbers to last year going into Q4. So I don't know what Q4 is going to look like. Obviously, there's a lot of concerns about a recession or in a recession, I guess, all of those types of concerns. But so far, sales volume, it's not, usually sales volume in Q4 is going to spike a lot. So we're just getting into that. We'll see what happens. But throughout the year so far, in the last couple of months, sales volume has been right around the same for us, at least, as it has been, as it was last year. So it doesn't seem like sales are dropping. It doesn't seem like sales are exploding. But I think as we get a little bit more into Q4 and we hit those shopping holidays, we'll really start to get a better picture.
Awesome. So, moving on to our next topic, that is repricing strategies. Now, another important metric that affect your Q4 sales and sales in general is repricing. It's essential if you want to remain competitive during the holiday season. Now, as a seller, you need to find the right repricing strategies that fit into your growth blueprint. Now, with that in mind, what is the oscillation price strategy and when should it be used? Ian,
Yeah, yeah. I guess that one's for me.
yeah, you are the
When
expert here.
Great. So, when should repricing be used? Repricing is something that should be utilized by all different types of sellers. Historically, SellerSnap has been a repricer for resellers on Amazon's marketplace, although we do have many solutions for brands and private labels as well. When it comes down to resellers, the bottom line is to win the buy box. So if you're a reseller and you have competition on that listing, you need to make sure that you're winning the buy box. So another reason why you might need repricing as a reseller as well is for those savvy enough sellers who are getting into the PPC space for these branded items. Because in order to drive that traffic to that listings page, you need to be the seller in the buy box. And so there is a correlation between advertising and the buy box when it comes to branded goods. On the flip side of that, for the brands and private label, repricing is super important because we need to make sure that we are keeping track of our competitors. Oftentimes, we have to remember that even though I don't have competitors on my listing, I do have competitors. I have competitors selling similar products. And so it's important to make sure that we are tracking those competitors. We are within range in order to stay an option for customers. I recently spoke to a client who was having an issue with a specific brand that he was selling. It was his own private label, where all of a sudden he saw a big fall off in sales. It dropped by like 25 or 30% almost overnight. And it took him almost a week to catch it. And basically what was happening was that he has one other main competitor selling a similar product who all of a sudden dropped their price and undercut that listing, that product. And so what happened is that seller basically upped their PPC game, dropped their price, and was able to capture a lot of those sales. And that seller still had a lot of time before they actually checked to see that the prices were changed. When usually they check it once a week, the seller actually let it go a little bit longer than usual because they got caught up in all different kinds of, the nitty gritty of the Amazon space. And so essentially what he's doing now is he's using SellerSnap to track the pricing of his competitors. And if it moves up or down, SellerSnap will adjust the price based on a specific rule that the seller set in order to make sure that his brand, his private label, is within a competitive price point of his competitors as well.
That was amazing, Ian. Thank you so much. Now, there are a ton of different repricing strategies that Amazon sellers use to win the buy box and increase sales. But oscillation repricing strategy is one we see outperforming many of the others. Well, moving on. Now, a lot of sellers seem to think that customers automatically prefer product with the lowest price, engaging in a race to the bottom. However, is that a right strategy, Ian? And what factors should be considered before creating a repricing rule?
Yeah, that's a really great question. There are a lot of different factors that Amazon takes into account when we're talking about repricing for the buy box specifically in this case. Amazon kind of positions themselves as the most customer centric company on the planet. And what that means is that they want to give the best customer experience. And just like we spoke about earlier, how reliability and choice are big options. Pricing is often up there in making sure that the customer gets what they want. And so, but in addition to pricing, we're looking at things like being in stock and repricing speed. And so when it comes down to, FBA items, when items are fulfilled by Amazon, you don't have to worry about repricing speed. But it's important to make sure that we are keeping up all these different metrics in order to provide the best customer experience, such as our IPI score, as Manish had mentioned before, in order to set ourselves ahead of our competition when when our competitors have the same pricing as us. And so when we're talking about factors that should be considered, we want to look at like the entire all the different data points that Amazon gives us in our business reports in order to make sure that we are putting ourselves even a little bit ahead of our competition, so we can get the most out of each listing that we list.
Well, that was amazing, Ian. Creating a pricing strategy that works best for you as a seller on Amazon is extremely crucial, and especially during the holiday season. And the expert tips from Ian is going to help you, Amazon sellers, to perform better this Q4. Now, let's move on to the questions. So we have few questions here. Let me highlight few of them.
One moment.
Okay. So I have a few items that are not selling well. Any tips to liquidate my existing stock? What about you, Blair?
It's a good question. And everyone else, guys, like we have some time. So if you guys have questions, we have some pretty talented folks here. So if there's a question under the face of the sun, like probably one of us has seen it at some point, or we know someone who's seen it. I don't have gray hairs yet, but I promise you they're coming. So
Right.
liquidation. Yeah, like there's a couple different scenarios. So traditionally what some brands do is like Amazon obviously has their liquidation set. And Manish, you'll probably have some really good insight alongside me of a couple different options. What we've seen brands do is that sometimes it makes sense and it just depends on the product and the value. Some brands will send it like back to one of our warehouses and then like we have liquidation partners. The issue is that like if Amazon, you liquidate it, they're just going to be able to dispose of it, right? And you're going to pay a fee regardless. So in some scenarios, what we've seen brands do is and if it's a brand versus like a reseller or wholesaler, some brands, what they'll do is they'll send us the stock like back to our warehouse, but then we'll do some level of like marketing PR with it. So for example, we work with this weighted blanket company. They were about to liquidate because they were last year's models. They had inventory issues. They don't have a Shopify store. So they were one-dimensional to Amazon. And what we end up prioritizing is that instead of all that money was going to be lost anyway, we built this entire charity strategy. And there was a huge PR push around it, which helped drive more traffic back because they put it on their social channels. They put it on their LinkedIn. It was a whole community event and it came from almost nothing. So with liquidation, there's not a lot of good scenarios, but you can kind of find the goodies inside of it. And if it's something like we could leverage it for giveaways, maybe you could give them to customers. You might be able to leverage that in a scenario too, or brand building. There's always a secondary option, but it's liquidation. So you can kind of search liquidation partners, or if you have a fulfillment partner, like we get a lot of messages and a lot of inbound, probably just like Manish does, of like people that want to buy the liquidation. So Manish, do you have any thoughts on that? Have any recommendations?
Yeah, I think one of the things that the sellers could do is bundles. Consumers love to save money. I don't know if I want a bundle of 3 weighted blankets, but if it's a consumable, it works. It really works because that's the reason why Costco is the number 2 seller in the US, because people love saving. And so really consider that strategy to get rid of any excess inventory. And Amazon does a great job of telling you what's the per unit cost is. So when you do the bundle, and that will also help you boost some sales rank for the item. So that's one strategy to consider. And if you have other channels like, where people go bargain hunting, things like eBay, that will be another place to put a lot of the items out. And of course, there are other liquidation platforms that Blair mentioned that you could take advantage of. The key is, my recommendation is, do not get stuck with a lot of inventory, and certainly you don't want to get charged for Q4 storage fees, because that's really eating into your margin. And then you certainly don't want to get into long-term storage. And if you've gotten that far, most likely the value of your product is entirely lost at that point. So just be very careful. And when placing restock orders, this is be observant. Don't be over optimistic or over pessimistic. Just the network congestions, the supply chain congestions are easing. Inflation is going up. So what was true 6 months ago is not true anymore. Interest rates are double in the last 6 months. So refresh your knowledge of what's happening today, as opposed to what news you might have heard 6 months ago.
Wonderful, wonderful, you both. Thank you so much for the answer. And let's move on to the next question. So it is from Hector Fong. Hi, Hector. How are you doing? So sending FBA shipments to Canada, what would be the best Canadian port to send it from China? Well, Blair. Blair is all up for the answer.
I've been waiting all day for a Canadian question. So thank you for
Amazing.
finally adding it there. So Amazon
Look at
Canada.
your happiness.
So firstly, congrats for going to Amazon.ca directly. Hallelujah. We finally have one on the board, guys. So the Canadian team is now officially winning. So my recommendation, if it's coming from China, like the Vancouver West Coast makes the most sense. Now, what you're going to end up having an issue with, just like with our Vancouver warehouse, for example, like if you have fulfillment out there, it's really expensive. Like traditionally, so we work with like a lot of the major aggregators here in Canada, and what we do for a lot of them, because think of like the West Coast in Vancouver, like a New York City or an LA. Like it's just really expensive to live there. That's why I'm not living there either. But so what we do instead is like we'll take it from that West Coast port, and then traditionally we'll truck it, or we'll put it on. There's surprisingly there's trains and stuff like that in Canada. It's not all igloos and snow. And we'll port it to our Toronto warehouse and then fulfill it to one of those local Amazon facilities. Like most of it, unless it's oversized, will probably go to something in Ontario. There's a bunch of Amazon fulfillment centers right in this Toronto hub, what we call the GTA. So like the YYZs of the world, for anyone that ships to Amazon Canada. So my recommendation, if you can, get the West Coast, get it here. If it's going right to Amazon, depending on it, but it might make more sense to send it to a local like Canadian warehouse or Canadian address, because you'll get like a local Toronto location too. So go Vancouver and then ship it over to Toronto and then to one of the local Brampton hubs, because 80% of all your orders will happen basically in that Southern Ontario. Like most Canadian orders don't happen outside of these like two little pockets, one in Toronto, one in Vancouver. So like all your orders are really in one stable place. So like just picture like only like LA, New York. That's all you got to basically deal with here in Canada. So it's simple, but not easy. But thank you for the Canadian question.
Awesome suggestions. Okay, so moving on to the next question. It is from Aaron. Hi, Aaron. Thank you for joining us today. So question on repricing. We have some ASINs with the minimum set below the buy box, but SellerSnap leaves the price at the buy box price, where we are winning 0%. What would be the reasoning behind that? Ian, go for it.
Yeah, this is a really specific question. I'll be pretty straightforward and say that it's going to be a tough one for me to answer without understanding the specific use case, and I don't know exactly who this customer is. But there, it could be a setting, and that is probably what it would be. So what I would suggest, Aaron, is we have a really great customer success and support team that would be able to help look into this on a case-by-case basis. and understand what is going on here and help provide solutions in order to get it sorted. Because again, there's so many different factors that go into play when it comes into repricing. We have our default settings, and then SellerApp is super customizable, which means that, depending on the size of your team, I've seen situations where team members are basically fighting each other, changing settings back and forth, and they don't realize that they are. So as I mentioned, we got to take everything on a case-by-case basis. Reach out to our team; they're more than happy to help around the clock, and I'm sure we can get it sorted for you.
Awesome. So that's it for today's session, everyone. Thank you so much for attending this. I would like to thank all our experts for this insightful and wonderful Q4 Mastery session. The strategies we have discussed are really going to help our audience to succeed this Q4. This is going to make a huge difference for them. Today was the final session of Amazon Q4 Mastery 2022, where we explored funding and budgeting, inventory management, and repricing trends. Well, I did mention about an announcement of giveaway winners at the start of the session. So the winners are Visakh Dutt for day 1 and Smiling Z for day 2. Woohoo! Congratulations on winning the SellerApp professional plan worth of $99 for 1 month. A big thank you to all our wonderful audience for your amazing response and comments. Hope you found this video helpful. It's your support that keeps us going. So while you prepare for this holiday season, don't forget to spread the holiday spirit. Spend time with your loved ones, and as always, happy selling!